What's going on, Washington Commanders Nation? It's your guy Rio with the latest and greatest on the Rambling with Rio YouTube channel. And today I am joined by special guest Chris the Rooster Russell from the Locked On Commanders podcast and the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980 and Odyssey app. Welcome to the show, Chris.
What's up, my guy Rio? How are you, pal? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. It's been a long time coming. How are you right now, man?
You know, I mean, I would say this, Rio, after let me see, 13 years in some way, shape, or form, every day covering this organization, it takes a lot out of you. And there really is never any slow time or rebound time or normal time or catch-up time, take a breath time. Maybe you get 2 weeks in the middle of July, something like that. I just, sometimes you don't even get that. I just hope, that one day fans, fans and media, together, the team, the organization can just be normal, can just, operate like a normal professional sports franchise, like a normal NFL franchise, and actually, kind of enjoy what they're all about, because when you combine all the chaos and all the dysfunction with all the losing, it does wear you down mentally, physically, emotionally. It takes a toll, as everybody knows, and I know it takes a toll on you, Rio, and I know it takes a toll on everybody that watches you and interacts with you. It obviously takes a toll on what I do in many different ways. And I get it. I understand it. I just hope at some point we can all act normal and, I don't know, talk about an 11-win team.
Oh my goodness. Listen. I've never seen an 11-win season in my life as a fan, bro. And it's I'm distraught every season, but we all play like we're all cogs to this machine. The team, the media, the fans, everyone who creates content around the team. Like there's a clear disconnect between all, and it all starts because there's always dysfunction. Like you said, there's no off season. You guys can't really go on vacation because there's a headline, there's an allegation, there's a scandal, or there's something salacious involving the team always taking place. We're going to try to keep it as football as possible today. The draft is in 8 days. So 8 days leading up to the draft, where do you stand on where Washington is leaning in the first round? Do you feel like you have a good grasp on it? Or do you feel like ever since the regime change, you guys don't have like as much feel for what the team's plans are in free agency in the draft process?
Well, I wouldn't say that last part for me anyway, because I'm not overly reliant on being provided inside information, quite honestly. That doesn't mean that I don't try and check and talk and whatever, and that I don't have access to some things and some people. But like, I think that the best way to say it, Rio, is, if they had the number 1 overall pick, it would be a little bit different. That is a decision you can control more of. When you're at number 11, or even anywhere near that number, but again, specifically for Washington at number 11, not only do we not know who's going to be the pick, but we don't even know who's going to be there, right? Because there's 10 teams in front of you, but then there's also teams that could jump up in front of you that you weren't necessarily counting on and factoring in their potential needs, where they might take one of the top receivers, or they might take a Kyle Hamilton, or they might take a Sauce Gardner or a Stingley or somebody like that. And usually you don't jump up into the top 10 unless it's for a quarterback, but I can't rule that out, right? Philadelphia and Dallas just made a move last year in the top 10 or right around that top 10. So you can always have, things that you don't expect. That being said, I think it's pretty safe to say that, it looks like Kyle Hamilton is going to drop to 11. It looks like. And we know there's going to be one of at least probably 3 receivers in a closely grouped group, if that makes sense, that are likely going to be there. Now, maybe not everybody is going to be there, but that's probably going to be the most likely scenario, right?
Yep.
Star free safety with some speed issues versus do we go wide receiver, and which one of the guys do we like the best? And that's what, to me, Rio, that's where I get in a situation of I'm either taking the kid Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, where there's a lack of talent in that group, and it's still a need, and he fits a lot of things that I'm looking for, or I'm trying to trade down desperately. And I'm trying to trade down desperately first in my mind, both before the pick and during the pick, because I don't have a third and a fifth. And I surrendered either a second or a third next year for Carson Wentz. So I'm trying to recoup some of that. That's my number one, like, kind of modus operandi, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That being said, you can't guarantee that you're going to actually get a deal done in the time that you're on the clock. So that's why you start working on it kind of earlier and surveying the situation. Hey, if this happens and that happens, would you be interested? Like, what would it cost? You try and get some of that precursor work done. But that would be like kind of how my approach is. To me, to take a receiver at number 11, assuming that 3 or maybe even 4 of the closely guarded group or the closely grouped group, if that makes sense, is there. I don't know if that represents good enough value at number 11. The reason why I can justify Hamilton is A, because I think he's a really good player, really good instincts, IQ, all that stuff, good size, tackling ability, smart, all of that can help you in different ways. But also because there just isn't as many safeties on the board as there are wide receivers. So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I'm going to take a receiver at number 11 that I have the answer, that I know for sure this dude, fill in the blank, whether it be, again, Olave, whether it be Garrett Wilson, whether it be Drake London. And those are probably the 3 guys that I know for sure that those guys are not only worthy of the 11 pick, but they're better than the rest.
Okay. And out of those 3 guys, if you had to rank them in the order of you think the Commanders' interest level would be, how would you rank them?
The receivers, you mean?
Yes, the 3 receivers,
Yeah,
Olave, Wilson, and London.
How I think they rank them is probably, I would probably say London,
Wilson,
then Garrett Wilson,
yep.
then Olave. Because I think, Rio, here's the thing. What we don't know, and maybe you disagree with this, what we don't, I've been talking about this on the podcast and on my radio show the last couple of days is, and I asked Charles Davis from NFL Network about it, teams draft for scheme and scheme fits and all that, and of course need, but need is not supposed to come above scheme and fit and so on and so forth, and best talent, best blah, 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 blah.
So they say.
But what I don't think pay enough attention to is this team looking for the best wide receiver in the group or the best wide receiver based on what they don't have? And the prototype, meaning what they don't have,
Big
is
body.
a 6'2-ish, maybe 6'3-ish, 220, 225-pound physical, go across the middle, 50-50 balls, run across the back line of the end zone. I'm here. Find me, Carson Wentz, because you can actually see over the line. Are they looking for that type, meaning a certain type of receiver, as opposed to necessarily a scheme fit? Because I think all of these guys, any good coach can make a guy that's talented fit their scheme. So are they looking for a certain type? And that's what I fear and what I think and what I sense is that they're looking for a certain type. And that's why I put London ahead of the 2 Ohio State guys. And that's not an insult to the 2 Ohio State guys. It's just that's what I sense.
Yep. And I see the common theme that I see people attaching to it is that Carson Wentz likes to throw to big receivers, and Ron has a history with big receivers. He had Devin Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin in Carolina. That didn't exactly work out, but I think Drake London is a different animal than those 2 guys. I've kind of slept on Drake London in the process because my mind just wants another Terry. I want another speed demon route technician receiver. But the way I feel, if it's not like a Kyle Hamilton or a Stingley or one of these DBs, it has to be one of these receivers, because I believe the same the same energy we've put into the defense, the same allocation we've put into the defense over these years in the draft, we have to start putting that towards the offense, especially if you want to convince this fan base that Carson Wentz is actually going to be the guy here.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's a really interesting point. And as we know, 5 drafts in a row, they've taken at least one defensive player in the first round, right? The one notable one was the year where they actually traded back into the first round to get Montez Sweat. So that makes it 5 years in a row. Allen, Payne, Sweat, Chase, and then Jamin Davis. We know they still don't have a good enough defense, right? That's a whole nother issue. But the one notable offensive exception in that 5-year period, unfortunately, is Dwayne, right? And we all know how sad that ended. But certainly the meter looks like it's pointed towards offense, right? Wanting not only to, again, add more talent and more depth to the offense, but also, like you said, help out Carson Wentz, justify Carson Wentz. Don't make it as hard on Carson Wentz as it was for Taylor Heineke and or anybody else that has come here. Make sure that, you have a succession plan in place for Terry McLaurin if Terry decides he doesn't want to sign here or they can't come to an agreement, or if you want to move on from Curtis Samuel after this year, which is very possible as well. So, I mean, I think all of the signs, Rio, point to offense and specifically receiver. My only question, and again, you're going to hear this after they do it and after they pick a receiver at 11. Well, this was the guy we had the highest ranked on our board this week. We liked him because of X, Y, and Z. Well, we just felt he was the best player in our mind. Well, why should we trust that? So, and I asked that not to be a jerk, but I asked that because we trusted you with Chase and the number 2 overall pick. Most of us thought Chase Young the right pick. But if they would have taken Justin Herbert, who clearly is right now the best player, we wouldn't be in the Carson Wentz situation and in the Carson Wentz business, right? Which would then free up other resources elsewhere. So we trusted you there. And Chase, of course, Chase gave us a good, strong second half of his rookie year. But Rio, you know this, he didn't play against anybody really good outside of Trent for one game. And he did a good job in that game, but he was completely stonewalled in the playoff game against a lesser player, the left tackle, Donovan
Smith. Yeah. Oh my God, he bullied
him. Right? And then we know that he was an inconsistent kind of mess in the first half of last year, and then now coming off the ACL. Now, that doesn't mean his career resume is written, but it just means that's where we're at, right? And then, of course, Jamin Davis. I'm higher on Jamin Davis than I think most fans, media, people are. I think he had a little pop and sizzle at times.
They're playing him out of position.
Huh?
I think they were playing him out of position. I don't think he was ready to be a Mike.
Sure, absolutely. But I don't know if he would have been like great if he was just at the weak side. My point is I'm higher on him than I think most people are, but I can't ignore reality. They didn't get enough production out of 2 consecutive first-round picks that they thought were the right guys. Now, again, that's a 2-year resume size sample and a 1-year size sample. That doesn't mean forever those picks are ruined. That doesn't mean forever that those picks can't be justified. It means right now. So for me to want to believe, when Ron takes to the podium next Thursday night and says, we pick player X because we think this, we think that, and that's the best player on our board, and we think he's the best fit. Fine. You have every right to do that. You're a head coach. You know much more about this process than any one of us. But for me to buy in totally, Rio, for me to believe totally, I'm going to have to see it before I believe it completely.
For sure. And something you mentioned a while back that I don't even want to imagine or try to fathom a situation that Terry McLaurin is not retained here. Me being the optimist in this situation, I cannot envision a future without one of the faces and pillars of the franchise, one of the guys that you have as the face of your rebrand. I am of the thinking that Logan got done 4 days before camp. Jonathan got done a night before camp. Can we expect a summer extension, or does the circumstances change because of this wild off season? You see guys like Debo just requested a trade, AJ Brown rumored to request a trade, and that class of receivers, they're all looking to be the first one to get the check. Like, is it different because of that, or do you still expect them to do business in the summertime and once Landon Collins' June 1st designation is off the books?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't expect it before June 1st, is what I would say. And it's not just because of the Landon Collins thing, it's also the NFL cycle and calendar and just everything going on. But I would say this to me, this is just me, they would be, excuse me, they would be making a mistake if they wait until the eve of training camp, late July, the eve of the regular season, early to mid September. They would be making a mistake, in my opinion, Rio, because it's likely that at least one of these 2019 non-first rounders, you mentioned Debo, who knows what happens with that situation. You got A.J. Brown, you got DK Metcalf as well. It's, and then you have the potential Cooper Kupp extension and rework, right? All factoring into that. So to me, the longer you wait on this, the pricier it gets. And especially if we get into the regular season. And I think Terry, and I think his like stance on OTAs and not on field work, I think Terry tells you, look, hey, I want to be here, but you guys got to help me. You guys got to protect me. You guys got to make sure as much as we possibly can that I'm not going out there and tearing up my ACL working in mid-May or something like that, right? Now, again, you can't prevent every scenario, Rio. You know that, right? I mean, somebody could walk out of their door, slip on their steps, and but you can protect some scenarios. And again, to me, there should be an impulse on the team more than Terry, but there should also be an impulse for Terry or an incentive for Terry to get it all done before training camp, meaning June 15th, June 5th, June 20th, whatever it might be, Rio. Get it done before some of these other 2019 non-first rounders get in. And like you said, Debo, wherever he gets traded, if he gets traded, it's likely that he doesn't get traded to a team and then doesn't sign a contract extension either with the deal or right away, if he even gets traded. But that's the point. You don't want Debo. You don't want A.J. Brown. You don't want DK Metcalf. You don't want those, and Cooper Kupp. You don't want them to continue to set the market and just naturally make the price tag higher.
And what's a fair for both parties offer for you? Like I was thinking something along the lines of like 4 years, 96 million, which puts him at 24 million a year, which may sound crazy to some people. Christian Kirk got 21 million a year, and he's never seen 1,000 yards received. What's a fair deal for both parties?
Yeah, to me, he's way better than Christian Kirk. Like, and I know there's different numbers on Christian Kirk's contract, because like you, Rio, I originally thought it was 21 million on average per, but I know some outlets, I think Spot Track or Over the Cap, are reporting that it's a little bit lower than that. Again, I think we can all agree Terry is better than Christian Kirk, right? So to me, if you use all of the different contracts that have been done, again, Tyreek Hill is better. There's no doubt about it. So you don't use that, but you use that as kind of, okay, that's there. You use Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, maybe because of the quarterbacks he's been with, is better. But you use that kind of as a bar or as a barometer or as are we in the same neighborhood? And to me, that number comes in. That number comes in somewhere around what you're talking about, a 4-year, $95-ish million deal. Maybe it's 24 million, maybe it's 24.5 million, maybe it's 23.5 million, maybe it's 25 million. I don't know. The one thing that we have to keep in mind, I would like to, and this is important, and I don't know if a lot of people are paying attention to this. Terry's got one more year left on the deal at a very, very, very modest number, right? Like $2 million or whatever it is this year. I would like it to be an extension, a 4-year extension, so that Terry's under contract for 5 years, not 4 years beyond, like starting now, if that makes sense. Not to mention, if you can keep that number lower this year, meaning not just rip up the current 4th year, which maybe his agent is going to want to do. I don't know.
Signing bonus. Throw a huge signing bonus.
But maybe you give Terry more money this year, right? However that gets done in terms of the signing bonus, like you said. But what I'm trying to get at is I don't I don't want the final year which we're about to enter to be ripped up and just thrown away and it just be a 4-year deal, period. I want 4 years tacked onto the one current year remaining. And somehow, some way, if you can keep my cap number at, I don't know, $5 or $6 million or something like that for 2022, yet reward Terry with the guaranteed money the way that, however they would structure it, that's ideally what I want. I want him under contract for 5 years, not 4.
No, absolutely. However, you gotta whatever you gotta do to acquiesce to keep our star humble, like perfect embodiment of this culture guy here. You get it done. And before I let you go, I just got to ask, what are reasonable expectations for this team record wise with a third place schedule, with a upgraded quarterback, and how much of an upgrade should we expect from Carson Wentz? Because I expect a significant upgrade. And if it's anything less, then we're going to look real funny in the light.
Yeah. I mean, listen, make no mistake about it. This team is built to contend for a playoff spot. And I would argue that in their mind, they feel they are built to contend for the NFC East, which is clearly the easiest way that they can get in, right? Because if you win the NFC East, you not only get in, but get a guaranteed home playoff game. And I know it hasn't worked out for them, but that's the easiest path, right? Control 3 teams as opposed to trying to play the entire field, right? So to me, the absolute minimum, and I mean stone cold minimum that this team has to win, and this is just the bottom line. I don't care what anybody thinks about quarterbacks win though, and all quarterbacks don't control everything. They have to win a minimum of 9 games. Period.
Facts.
End of story.
100%.
Minimum. And really, Rio, you know this. With what they have on defense, even though it's imperfect, and what they have right now on offense, and knowing that they're going to add at least one offensive weapon in the first 2 rounds of the draft, and again, likely at number 11, they absolutely have to, in my opinion, or should be able, with the schedule, like you said, with the division being far from really difficult, they should win 10 games. They should win 10 games. And if they don't win minimum of 9, that like 9 is the stone cold minimum. To me, 10 really should be what they're about in year 3 of the Rivera era. Okay. And if they fall short of that with everything that we just touched on, to me, that's a major disappointment. And 10 doesn't guarantee you the division. 10 doesn't guarantee you the playoffs. But if you win 10 and go 10-7, even if you don't make the playoffs, Rio,
that's a successful season.
I mean, is it a successful season? Ultimately, probably not, because you didn't make the playoffs and that's the ultimate goal. But I mean, it's hard for anybody to walk away going, oh, you were 10-7, but you sucked, or another terrible year, or wow, it's year now going into year 4. Ron, really, like, there'll be some people that are disappointed at 10-7. I got it. I understand. The ultimate goal is to get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl, make the playoffs, all that stuff. Yeah. But if you go 10-7, not that things are not out of your control, because of course they can be. If you go 10-7, you say, look, we were screwed by some sort of weird technicality, whether it be, a 4th tiebreaker or whatever. It wasn't because we were bad or because we had Hershey squirts in our underwear against a bad team. You know what I'm saying?
Hell yeah. But I feel like 10 wins is definitely getting you in this conference, because the AFC is an absolute bloodbath, and the NFC, I'm liking where we stand on paper in the NFC, but we got to see it done. And if it's anything under 9 or 8 wins, if it's 7 wins or less, I'm one that believes that Ron's leash is long here. Shit starts getting murky if it's a catastrophically bad season, and if this quarterback acquisition that you put this composition and ate the contract for doesn't work, it's gonna get ugly, right? It's gonna be real tight for Ron next offseason.
And that's the thing, Rio. You just mentioned it. If they win 7 or 8 games, which means sub 500, and 7 would be like to me, like the worst, because that would be 3 years in a row of 7 wins, right? Yeah. Really no sustainable progress that you can measure.
Hat trick.
if they do that, right? But think about this nightmare scenario. You win 7 or 8 games, and at some point you were fooled into doing a legitimate, and I mean a bona fide contract extension for Carson Wentz, where he gets a lot more guaranteed money and where there's a lot more dead money on the hook for years, for the next couple of years, if you want to move on from. Right now, we know there's none, right? But if you do a legitimate, bona fide contract extension, which Ron has talked about once at least, if you do a legitimate, bona fide contract extension, say between now and let's call it December 1st, Rio, or even December 15th, and you win 7 or 8 games and you don't make the playoffs, that is the nightmare scenario. And that's one thing I talked about with David on the Locked On Commanders podcast, with Pete on my radio show on the Team 980. That to me represents the double whammy, the double, oh my God, what are we doing here? And how do we get out of this terrible disaster again for this franchise?
It just seems like we're always in like one of 3 positions. We're always in a position where we don't have a finite answer at the quarterback position. We're not bad enough to have our pick of the litter without having to trade up significantly to get the guy. And we're never good enough to just know we're a playoff team throughout the season. I would like one of those things to change, and for the first time in my life, I'd like to see an 11-win season. But I thank you for your time today. I know you got to run. I know you got stuff to do. Let folks know where to find you and where to follow you, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Rio. So, people can on Twitter at WrestleMania621. You can yell at me there. Try and be nice. I try and be nice back. A younger me wasn't as nice. At WrestleMania621, of course, you can listen and watch the Locked On Commanders podcast with me and David Harrison on YouTube, anywhere, podcasts are available, 5 days a week, 30 minutes or less. We try and, knock all that out and bring, as much unique content as we can in a small window. And then Monday through Friday, from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern time on the Team 980 all throughout the DMV area, and as well the Odyssey app worldwide, anywhere, crystal clear on your phone, on your browser, whatever. Team 980 Odyssey app. Pete Medhurst and I, do 4 hours. Now that's not just about the Commanders. So if you're, it's a lot about the Commanders, too much about the Commanders in my opinion, but it's not just about the Commanders. So if you're looking for just Commanders content from me, clearly, again, we just do that on the podcast. If you're looking for a lot of Commanders and a bunch of other little stuff, local, national, that's what we do on the radio show.
Absolutely. You guys be nice to Chris. Chris is one of the good ones in the media, man. He's one of the guys I trust and enjoy talking to, and I enjoy his transparency, even if I don't agree with him. Thank you again for coming on with me, big guy.
I appreciate you, Rio, as always. Good to be with you.
Man. Take care, man.